We started Full Frame in 2014 with a mission to bring in-depth conversations and unique perspectives. In the last decade, we've introduced you to some of the biggest newsmakers and visionaries of our time. From episode 1, I spoke with Microsoft founder and philanthropist Bill Gates, then the richest man in the world. We talked about how the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was tackling some of the most urgent global public health challenges of the time. Gates is the co-founder of Microsoft. He's one of the richest people in the world, and he has put his fortune into philanthropic causes. To date, he's donated more than $59 billion to the Gates Foundation.
Once you decide that giving your children huge amounts of money is not great for them or society, then you think, okay, what are the philanthropic causes? What are the great injustices in the world? And can giving at a philanthropic level that's still very small compared to governmental level, can it be so catalytic? Can it invent a new vaccine or a new approach or make sure things are measured? So all the aid money spent in a better way. And that's become my second career. I was doing that part-time starting in the 90s. And then 2008 is when my full-time work at Microsoft came to an end. So I've had 5 years now to learn, to meet the scientists, to go out to Africa, and I'm loving the work and the same type of spirit of backing great scientists, thinking long term, being willing to make mistakes. A lot of what I learned at Microsoft is very applicable to this new area.
You talk about goals, but you also are really good at predictions. By 2035, there will be almost no poor countries left in the world. People have been going at this for a long time. A lot of bright people. What makes you so optimistic that this will get licked?
Well, we start several hundred years ago where everybody was poor. We were a bunch of farmers and always kind of on the edge of starvation. So a miracle took place, a miracle of science and products and markets. And at first, a small part of the world got rich. And in 1960, you could see there was a bulge of people in the rich world, and then the rest was poor and not much in between. Now, since then, the good practices that brought the rich world up, education, infrastructure, seeds, medicine, stability, those have been adopted by lots of places, China, Mexico, Brazil. They're sort of exemplars because they were as poor as any country. China actually poorer than most. And yet, by applying the latest industrial approaches, science, market-based pricing, what's happened is incredible there. And, how do we measure that? Life expectancy, literacy, reduction in childhood death, things that are universal values that really count quite a bit. So the question is, why should there be any country that doesn't participate? Yes, it's tough if you have a war. You've got to get stability. If you're a landlocked country in Africa, you've got malaria, parasitic diseases, tough geography. You have a very heterogeneous culture of tribes that haven't worked together much and don't think of their nation as something that they are really that much part of. So you really have to build that up in countries with no roads and not much literacy. So they may lag. But my belief is that we'll have, maybe less than 10 countries that are low income by that time. And of course, that means the donors can really focus in on the very toughest cases. And the line of progress, along with some innovation, suggests that it's not a crazy goal.
Public health has remained an important topic, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. Even before lockdowns began, I sat down with epidemiologist John Mazette to talk about how infectious diseases develop and can mushroom around the world. It's amazing to me, the animal linkage to the human population. So talk to me about that spark, because you got into veterinary medicine, but then you see this link.
Sure.
How does that kind of grow into where we are today?
Well, for me, it was really, we live in California in this coastal community, and I was working to save sea otters, actually, and what do they eat? They eat sushi. And I was finding these diseases that come from human populations and people's pets that move into the coastal communities. And I thought, oh my goodness, well, little kids who are out with their parents eating sushi also are very susceptible to these things. People with immunocompromised systems, like living with HIV/AIDS, are very sensitive. And I thought, oh, we have to do something. And that really pushed my career into what we call One Health, where we think about the connections, humans, animals, plants, and the environment.
Mazette spearheads a team with the One Health approach. They scour the globe searching for emerging zoonotic pathogens. When a virus moves from animals to humans, as it did with COVID, it's referred to as a spillover event.
People don't remember that HIV actually is a spillover event. And most of the diseases that we have that surprise us, take us by storm, even cause epidemics and pandemics, are those that spill over from animals.
And it's so interesting because it's a sea change in many respects because everything's on the back end. And you're saying, let's work on the front end. How well was that received initially?
I think, well, first of all, there's building momentum in the scientific community, the policy community, the health delivery community that we need to make this sea change. And so it's almost like a grassroots movement, and getting the folks sort of that control resources to understand that is a harder push because, of course, policymakers want to respond to their constituents, and they're going to respond to what is causing them current health problems or what is causing them to not be economically as in a good condition as they'd like to be. So it's easier to respond and say, oh my gosh, something's coming, I'm afraid, let's take care of it now with the resources than it is to say, let's get in front of this, because that feels like it's not an emergency. The problem is, if we keep doing it that way, more and more people die than need to die. And again, we spend so many more dollars than we need to because we don't know what we're handling. When you go to your doctor and you feel sick, your doctor takes samples and checks off. Everybody gets that little piece of paper, or now it's computerized, but they check the boxes, do this test, do this test, do this test. There's no test on there for, please find everything else. Please find what we don't know yet. Please find the virus that's actually probably making you sick today. There's no box for that. We want to change that. And then the time is now, it's possible.
During the pandemic, while everyone dealt with the virus, the Asian American community was also dealing with venom as racism against Asians increased. I spoke with John C. Yang, president of Asian Americans Advancing Justice. And I'm sure you hear the stories. What are some that really resonate with you?
A couple of really resonate. The Texas story in particular, where a father and his two young children were stabbed outside of a Sam's Club by a person that blamed him for bringing the virus to the United States. It really affects me in part because I am a father of two kids. And to think of a father having to live that experience really resonates in terms of why it matters in terms of the work that we do. And then all of the microaggressions or the micro incidents taken together, and these are the racial epithets. These are the small things that happen where people say, go back to your own country or get away from me. That taken together really causes us to worry about sort of where we are headed, but just how Asian Americans are viewed right now in this moment. We are in a time when people are fearful. And that's the reality. We are under the COVID-19 environment. Everyone is fearful, and there's a realness to that. But that fear shouldn't translate to hate. That fear shouldn't translate to racism. And in that sense, that is where I have concern for the Asian American community right now. I have concern that Asian Americans are getting stereotyped, are getting targeted for reasons that have to do with more misinformation than real information.
With the onset of COVID-19, some researchers wondered if climate change contributed to the pandemic's ability to emerge and spread. This remains arguably the biggest challenge we face today: how to save the planet. Climate change, conservation, and sustainable development have been big themes throughout Full Frame's last decade.
I love being a part of their world. They're completely innocent of anything humans do.
From an episode in 2016, world-renowned oceanographer Sylvia Earle talked about how the survival of all species depends on the survival of the oceans.
We need the ocean, a healthy, functioning ocean, every bit as much as a whale shark or a coral reef or whatever it is that we think of as being in the ocean. We are in the ocean, but we need the ocean as the generator of the oxygen that we breathe, of this fabric of life that maintains the chemistry of the planet, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, things that humans have found words to describe the nature of what makes Earth a planet that is suitable for us. Now, there are a lot of smart creatures on Earth other than humans. So think about elephants, cats and dogs and horses and dolphins and whales, and I know some very smart fish and birds. But they cannot know what we know. And we now know that our lives depend on taking care of the natural systems that make Earth suitable for us in a universe of unfriendly options. We can dream of Mars, we can dream of setting up housekeeping somewhere else. But first we have to make peace with Earth.
Since then, a new generation of climate activists have mobilized, inspired by the work of Earle and others. I spoke with one of these young environmentalists, Sophia Keani.
I had never been happier to see fear.
Keani's willing to take on big oil lobbyists with deep pockets.
You're up against so much. It doesn't seem like a fair fight. How do you square that?
No, I mean, you're completely right. And I think that that's why there's also so much need for greater regulation and oversight over like political donations, for example. The only thing that we can, I think, hold on to is a sense of hope and optimism. And to think about the fact that I work with so many incredible young people who have devoted so much time and effort to, instead of like using their free time to like hang out with their friends, like they're doing what I'm doing, and they're dedicating their free time to raising awareness about the issue of climate change. And for me to see that like 8,000 young people signed up to work with Climate Cardinals, like that shows there are so many people in this current generation who care so much about this issue and have the power to make an impact. And I think that banking on young people and capitalizing on these feelings that we have towards wanting a better world and wanting climate action, like that motivates me and makes me think that the world is going to be in a better place, and that we just need to band together, look for ways to partner and really champion intergenerational collaboration.
From grassroots calls to action to government officials who have the power to change policies. I traveled to the Arctic and sat down with Icelandic Prime Minister Katrín Jakobsdóttir to understand how climate change is transforming the landscape and impacting the way of life for Icelanders.
As far as climate, you wrote a op-ed piece in the New York Times in August of 2019, and the words really jumped right off the page. The ice is leaving.
Yeah.
And it was such a heartfelt, personal story about how our actions in the United States, everywhere around the world, are impacting you and your country. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, maybe it's part of that. Living in Iceland, we are in a very close, the nature is really everywhere. Yeah. I just live here in Reykjavik, the capital, but I only have to walk a few steps and then I'm looking at the sea. The glaciers are also part of our nearest surroundings. So you could say that we're very conscious about the consequences of climate change on our neighborhood, if I could say so, which is really the whole ecology of Iceland. And for us, the glaciers are a very important part of not just the landscape and our environment, but they are also the source of our renewable energies, because we actually use the glacial rivers that come from the glaciers to make electricity. So what we're seeing happening, we're seeing the glaciers retreating. They are slowly moving back, getting smaller every year. And this op-ed you mentioned was because one of the glaciers actually had disappeared. So we're actually seeing climate change happen under our very noses.
How frightening is that? I mean, to see a glacier disappear.
Well, I think it really shows us that this isn't just words, on a paper. It's not just a report, one of those reports that is read and then just put in the shelf. It's really happening. It's going to have a huge effect on all our lives. And the glaciers are just one part of that. We also, when you meet Icelandic fishermen, they actually see the change that's happening in the marine waters, which are actually caused by climate change.